So there we go. So perfect. So attendees are rolling in shortly. That means we're good to go. So yeah, thank you guys and welcome to this edition of Startup Guide Banjul. And this event is actually proudly sponsored by Table. Table, we're actually one of our newest partners that actually we've worked with for the past, for the past months to see how best they can accelerate their startup in Gambia and also across Africa. So it has been a pleasure for them to be part of this initiative. Considering what we bring to our community, Startup Guide, we educate, inspire, and connect. And what we intended to do is to have an event as such, which is going to talk about emerging business trends in the fourth industrial revolution. And we couldn't have done it better without actually having experts like yourself, Mr. Maodo, Mr. Esso, and also Kitawa, Wemo, and also Mo Abuali. All of you guys from different backgrounds and also from different settings to actually speak to us about your perceptions on what we can learn from based on your expertise on the event. So welcome you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually start with all of you guys. So it's actually customary for Startup Guide to actually have an overview of. We already have your bios, which are amazing, but it's also fantastic to also listen from you guys to learn about what you guys have been up to, some of the disruptions that you guys have been involved in, so that the attendees will know about this journey, and then we can also pinpoint some of those activities alongside the discussions as well. So we're going to start with Mo. You can just introduce yourself and give us a brief background about what you do, with your company, Internet of Things company, which you have founded, and yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Maodo. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this call. So I'm originally from Africa. I'm originally actually from Egypt. I was born in Egypt, and I immigrated to the United States about 20 years ago. So I'm based out of Ohio, Cincinnati, and my company, IoT Co, stands for the Internet of Things company. So my personal background is about 20 years in the industry. I've worked in manufacturing. I've worked in the automotive industry, companies like Toyota, for example. I'm an engineer, industrial engineer, and then I moved into the software space. So I worked for a German software company that provides software solutions for manufacturing. So what my company does, very shortly, is we are educators. We provide training around the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0, and the industrial Internet of Things. Second, we have a software product that uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to do predictive analytics for manufacturing. And last is we do consulting around digital transformation and how do we help manufacturers establish a digital transformation strategy and scale and execute the digital transformation strategy. So that's me, and that's what we do. And I think you're based out of Ghana, correct? Or Gambia?
No, I'm based in Gambia. I'm based in Gambia.
Gambia? Okay.
Gambia.
So I think the flag of Gambia is red, green, and blue, right?
Red, white, blue, white, green. Yeah.
So I decided to wear red today just to match maybe part of the Gambia flag.
Perfect.
Good to be here.
Awesome. Good to be here. So we're going to move to Kitawa. Kitawa is the founder of Mama Ventures, all the way from Kenya. She's been working with, women entrepreneurs, helping them to accelerate and scale their businesses. So it's a pleasure to have you here. If you can introduce yourself and what you do, Kitawa.
Great. Lovely to see such amazing people doing amazing things across the globe, and just to see how great the impact of growing the continent is as far as working with businesses is. And so I'm just really honored to be amongst such amazing, brilliant minds. And thank you for having me. I think this is a great opportunity as well in such difficult times.
If you can tell us a bit about also what you do. Yeah.
So my name is Kitawa Wemo. I'm the founder of Mama Social Ventures, which is an impact venture builder for early stage businesses. with a keen focus on female founders. And so essentially what we do is we're a catalyst for the Kenyan ecosystem for startups, working with accelerators, incubators, and maker spaces, and to track performance and risk for startups, because this is something that we realized was missing in the space. Just as businesses grow from infancy, how best can they be able to understand where they are using different elements of data to understand how their businesses are performing and just become more intelligent in how they manage their metrics, because that's something that we realized was missing in the space, that a lot of businesses were really good at telling stories, but we're really missing the key thing, which is numbers. And so that's essentially what Mama does in supporting early stage ventures in Kenya and the greater East Africa.
Thank you so much, Kitawa. And now we move to Esso. I call him the man from Paris. So you can introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. And I'm Esso Djafalong. I'm an engineer in computer science. So I used to develop and also teach blockchain to universities, and I'm also a consultant in blockchain. And currently I'm working on Crunchchain. So Crunchchain is a startup that have been awarded in France and also in Africa last year. And Crunchchain is a software that can be plugged on any institution or any business who want to use the blockchain and who don't really want to deal with the technical part of the blockchain. So that's what I'm doing. And lastly, I've also add a DeFi to my blockchain. Is new. Is a new concept. I will explain it later. Is a DeFi. So I've added to my blockchain solution. So now I have a package in my blockchain solution. So I will explain all those technical terms later. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Izo. And now to Brother Maodo. Maodo works for the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, and he's been doing amazing, work in Ghana. So it's a pleasure to have you here, brother.
Thank you very much for having me. It's good to see you, Modu. I am Maodo Jallow. I'm from the Gambia, with my brother here. Modu from the Gambia. I wish I was with you in person, but given what's going on, it's not possible. But thank God for technology. So I currently am based in Ghana. I am an analyst working with the Tony Blair Institute, as Modu mentioned. What that means specifically is that we have a unique approach of providing bespoke support to governments across the African continent, usually at the center of government and also with ministries, working to help them reach their goals and their priorities, essentially. So if you think of us sort of like a non-for-profit consulting advisory firm, that comes in with technical expertise and also unique insights and an ability to synthesize best practice from around the world in a way that helps governments, govern better, essentially. That's what we do. So my background and my relevance to this conversation is I used to work for UNIDO, which is the UN Industrial Development Organization, and they do a lot of work around Industry 4.0 and Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I think my unique contribution to this conversation will be around how developing countries and Africa as a continent is looking at Industry 4.0 and what are some of the things that I think people overlook about Industry 4.0. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for that intro. And I think we have Wiza. Wiza just joined in shortly. Brother Wiza is a developer. He also works for Hoover Developer Services. He's from Malawi. He's also disrupting. One of those guys I have a lot of respect for. So welcome, brother. Finally, you're able to join in. If you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. Wiza Jalakazi here. Nairobi. I work with a company called Hoover Developer Services. We build software infrastructure for developers building on top of Android to be able to easily integrate into payment methods around them that run on top of USSD and SIM toolkit technology. In terms of relevance to this conversation, I work with a lot of people who are building technologies that are native to Industry 4.0 and take advantage of the internet and this generation of really digitally native people. And I'm excited to be here. Happy to share the little that I've learned over the last few years working in the space.
Great, thank you, Wiza. I can see you using the power of technology because I can't even see you at the moment, which is which is quite interesting. But anyway, it's good to have you around. So basically, so for those that are on the attendees list, you can actually drop all your questions on the chat list. Then we can just route all those informations to the speakers, and then they can share their insights on what they have on the topic. So I'm gonna hit back to Mo. You've made an intro on working on the Industry 4.0, which is one of the technologies that are actually shaping the way industries operate right now in the Ford industry. So maybe if you can just give us a little bit about the principles of digital transformation in the Industry 4.0 from your experience. Yeah, for those of us that don't really have any idea about what it is.
It's a good question. I mean, if I start from the top, we usually start by defining what is IoT. So IoT is the Internet of Things, and it's actually, it's not, I wouldn't say it's new. It has been around for many years, decades actually. If you look at safety critical industries, right? If you look at jet engines in the sky, if you look at, you know, power plants, nuclear power plants, right? You know, we have been collecting data for many, many years from these devices, right? And we've been analyzing that data for many, many years. And the reason we've been doing it is that it is safety critical to humans. So it must be monitored and we must be able to assess performance, right? So that's IoT. It's all devices, all things. If you go a little bit deeper into IIoT, which is Industrial Internet of Things, we're talking about a factory, right? We're talking about within the four walls of a manufacturing operation. So how do we collect data? How do we use the cloud? How do we use the internet? How do we use analytics, right? And what is the business case around it? And then we talk about Industry 4.0, which is actually an initiative that was initially born in Germany, and now it's a global initiative. In the US, we call it Manufacturing 4.0. We call it Smart Factory. And there's many companies that have their own names. For example, General Electric, GE, they call it Brilliant Factory, right? So everybody has a name, but Industry 4.0 at the end of the day is about how do you create a cyber physical system. A cyber physical system, CPS, is the IT world, which is your internet, is your cloud, and the physical world, which is your assets, right? So how can I take a factory or a machine or a part I'm producing, and how do I mirror that using analytics, using internet, using cloud in the virtual world, right? So this is Industry 4.0. And my only comment here is a lot of people start with the technology, but we like to start with the business case. What is the business case of doing Industry 4.0? What are you trying to achieve, right? Thinking about the end in mind. Do you want to improve uptime? Do you want to reduce your quality issues? Do you want to improve your spare part? So Industry 4.0 must hit the bottom line, which is your P&L, your profit and loss, and help you, whether you're a manufacturer or a non-manufacturer, to use technology and to improve, right? So that's my view of the world today.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, I mean, does that mean, because you spoke about the predictive analysis, so does that mean that businesses needs to be really shifting from just getting into investing in new technology without, you know, having to do a lot of, I mean, they need to do a lot of background, I mean, analysis before they can invest in this technology. Is that what you mean by the IoT standards?
Yeah, and the other speakers may also, you know, bring in their opinion, but I don't think there's a formal standard today around IoT, okay? Right. Maybe there's an association called the ISA. In the US, there's an association called NAM. Maybe in Africa, there's an association, but I would not say there is a strict standard. So many companies define their own standard, but at the end of the day, I think there are 4 pillars. Number one is the business case and the return on investment. Number 2 is the connectivity, because you have to be connected. You have to be collecting some type of data, right? Number 3 is analytics. So what type of analytics are you applying on the data? And number 4 is the technology, right? So we have a colleague today who's going to talk about blockchain, 5G, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, right? So in my view, those are the 4 pillars that would make up an IoT strategy.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to Maodo for simple reason that we've seen one of the articles that was published by your by your firm, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, actually spoke about the repurposing. I'm sure you're very familiar about the term, and I was pretty much fascinated because I don't think Africa and the other regions are really producing industries that are realigning their strategies to repurposing. So how does it fit in to new businesses right now? Because I'll give you a business case for Gambia, for example. We've seen, one of the producers of minerals like Banjul is actually going out. But if they had a repurposing strategy, for example, it could have actually prevented them from actually going out. So what is the significance of having this tool in emerging business?
I think honestly, your question has, to me anyway, it has 2 aspects to it. So number one is, how are we preparing as African countries or economies for Industry 4.0, and how can we remain relevant in this, ever sort of accelerating space? And then the second part is in the context of COVID-19, which is even further accelerating the process of Industry 4.0, how are we adapting, right? So I'll take the within COVID-19 aspect first. So the other day I was looking through Twitter and I saw, MRC is a medical research center in the Gambia, very well known under the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And they are working hand in hand with a company called Make 3D in the Gambia. And they're actually using 3D printing to make PPE, right? Now, this goes to what Mo was talking about, which is you need to ensure that the business case is there before you invest in these, and they're very expensive technologies, So you can't put the cart before the horse, as they say, right? You can't just say, because everyone's talking about Industry 4.0, we're going to invest a bunch of money in this without actually having a case for it. And I think that's the first point that I really want to make in this webinar is, let's make sure as governments, but also as businesses, that when we're investing in these technologies, there's already a business case for it that we're making. So that's one aspect. So the other aspect is how are we preparing ourselves for the inevitable shift towards Industry 4.0. Now, again, taking the African context, we are very much at a point where we have to make a decision and stick with it. So what I mean by that is, for example, when you talk about repurposing manufacturing to produce PPE, when COVID-19 hit, countries like Kenya already had car manufacturing industries, countries like South Africa, so on. So they were able to very quickly repurpose that manufacturing that was already being done because they had the raw materials, the expertise to create ventilators, right? Now, in a country like Gambia, we don't have a car manufacturing industry. So you can't do that. And trying to do that when the virus is already hit is futile. You're basically throwing money at a problem and you're not going to solve it. Now, in Ghana, where I am, they repurposed their manufacturing from textile and garments. So some of the biggest factories here that were making textile and garments were repurposed to make PPE. I think there's a lot we can learn from that in terms of Industry 4.0. So how can we repurpose, and I love the word that you use, again, referring to the article that we released, how can we repurpose our manufacturing that already exists and make it more competitive globally by infusing bits and pieces of Industry 4.0? I think that's where we are at the moment. I don't think we're at a stage like Germany, like the US, like China, where we can wholesale, rip up the factory floor and rebuild it with the mindset of having it be more sort of aligned, you know, with Industry 4.0. And just before I wrap up, I just wanted to point out, while I was working with UNIDO, there was a gentleman from a company called Contexta that came up to us and told us about what he does. And I thought to myself, oh God, he's another one of these guys who's going to come and tell me about revolutionizing manufacturing through Industry 4.0. But then as I spoke to him, my ears, you know, perked up and I listened, because he was talking about, in a way, what Mo was talking about, which is how do we enable productivity of the human workforce by using Industry 4.0? So not replacing labor, but instead optimizing labor. I think that's where I would really be an advocate for Industry 4.0. But if you have a situation where you completely rip up the factory floor and say we're going to redesign it and make it all robotic, then I would probably step away from that. You know, as someone who has that, you know, employment is a big deal at the moment on the continent specifically. So yeah, that's, I hope I answered your question. But
yeah, perfect. So I'm gonna move to Kitawa before I go to the other segment. So Kitawa, we've seen Kenya really, you know, a place where obviously, you know, new emerging businesses are coming about. And I love the term that they use, Silicon Savannah. I'm sure you're very familiar with that terminology. I was having a look at it, you know, earlier today, but you've been working with a lot of women businesses. So I'm much more particular about, because when you run an accelerator program, for example, or when you run any program that's going to involve businesses, or whether it's to scale them, or whether it's to get them attracted to venture capitalists, there are things that you look out for. So what are these things that are much more ideal to you as an ecosystem enabler, and also someone that is scaling business? Like, what are you looking at? Like, what are you solving at the moment? Because that's when you look about, you know, when you talk about emerging businesses, you need to look at the root causes and how can you scale, how can you compete with the other markets, what new emerging technologies do you need to incorporate? So what is exactly there for you at the moment? Like, what are you solving right now?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing for anyone who's working in the space that we are working is to understand, and what both speakers have said, and one thing that has come up a lot is the business case. Mm-hmm. And so one of the biggest things that we play a huge role in is finding where technology and business meet. And I think that's something that has really either missed out, we've missed out a lot on, because you find maybe the engineers are the ones who are looking to build businesses, and then we end up having amazing technology that no one wants to use because they haven't really understood what value they'll be creating in the markets that they're launching their solutions into. And then you also end up having really amazing entrepreneurs who are really visionary leaders who have these amazing ideas and problems that they can solve for the continent, but not really understanding what technology that they might want to use. And so they end up just dropping the interesting buzzwords, blockchain and robotics, and you can definitely read in between the lines. And so one of the biggest things that we end up doing is just bridging that gap and having the two sides of a business being able to communicate with each other, to have impactful businesses that are able to scale across the continent and across the world. But I must say, I think one of the biggest challenges that we do face is just barriers of entry, where we are the first barrier of entry as the people. And I think one of the things that we do try and push is helping more local developers who are really interesting and really smart to see that they can actually build superior technology and compete at a global scale. Yeah, so I think to answer your question, it's just how do the two sides of a business communicate, and how do we build revolutionary business? You see conversations about data that is quote unquote racist. And I say, well, there's not enough data points to then build technology that understands us as Africans. So you can build it yourself and solve the problem. So I think there's, as I said, the first barrier is ourselves as the people to build technology that is superior and global standard. So yeah.
Yeah, so just before you go, I mean, we've seen the drop of funding for most important, gender that you actually work with, which is females. And I was a bit more worried, and I wanted to have your perception about it. I mean, was it lack of preparation for the businesses that were being presented to investors, or what was happening? Because that was really a hit, and isn't that worrying to see the
I
funding?
think, yeah. Well, I think in that space, and I know like we just did a huge study that is doing rounds across the internet, and one of the things is understanding that there's as a startup, you're getting into a market where you're already high risk. You're walking into a room, and no matter how amazing you are, you already are branded as a high risk business. And if, especially if you haven't been invested in yet, or if your idea is really still young and still hasn't generated revenue and users, it's only natural for the investors to kind of hold on to their pocket for a bit longer as they observe how you're doing in the tough times. And so I would definitely say that one of the reasons why we are quite adamant in supporting women is you are a startup once, you're high risk, and it's, as a woman in business, it's not necessarily that you are inferior when you're walking into a room. It's just the odds are almost always against you. Many reasons that we will not get into as much, but not that I think the COVID situation has caught every business in the world at its knees. And it doesn't matter if you're a startup or $1 billion company. We're having businesses closing in 3 weeks or 3 months just because they were not prepared for this particular type of risk. And so one of the things that my business does is looking at all potential risks at the beginning before you put a dollar into your business, and understanding that you need to mitigate this before you start, and reverse engineer from where you see your business will be in 10 years and what you need to do and the resources that you need to put in place before you go and do your giant pitch, before you build an app or build the technology to support that. So I think there is definitely an opportunity for African businesses to grow and grow beyond COVID. I would say for sure that African businesses really struggle because the continent is severely underdeveloped in terms of our digital infrastructure. And so sometimes I find that as a blessing in disguise. The fact that the conditions are so harsh that then we might be able to build really outstanding businesses because there's minimum resources and the technology is not as strong, but it gives you this blank canvas to really build something that solves actual African problems that we understand, which is, yeah, it's an interesting space to work in, for sure.
Thank you. So that was a great insight. So I'm going to move to Wiza for simple reason that developers are all over. They actually hire in most cases when most of these tools are designed for businesses. So Brother Wiza has been traveling all around Africa, working in different projects. I'm pretty much interested in some of the things that you find fascinating, because I know in your journey there has also been a lot of frustrations. Looking at some of the articles that you've been publishing, some of your experiences, you've built some of the most amazing technologies. In 2012 you did one with one of your friends, and in Malawi, and you were a bit more interested with how it took the whole Malawian ecosystem to catch up. But so I wanted to have an idea as a developer, for those that are here in the attendees list, like what exactly should we be looking at when we are looking at improvising new technology in our businesses? Because as we have the topic, emerging businesses in the fourth industrial revolution. So we need to be cognizant of the fact of whatever we want to improve on our business needs to be in line with what the world needs. So what is your perception about it based on your experience?
I think the most relevant piece for developers, especially on the continent right now, is around making sure you have the right skills that are relevant to what is actually being deployed in the industry today. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by this is like there are different approaches and technologies that are powering Industry 4.0. And I think like mobile plays a very big role on the continent. And I think that like developers who are acquiring skills around how to use mobile technologies and build for this environment where some of the infrastructure might not be as reliable can be quite useful. I think one of the 4 design principles of Industry 4.0 relies on interconnection and interconnectivity of devices, which I think Mo alluded to earlier. And you find that, like, say for an industry like pay-as-you-go solar, which is very big here in Africa, is where grid electricity generating device that you can use maybe to power the lights in your home or to power a small radio or a small TV. And you pay for that with like airtime or mobile money over time. And you find that the pay-as-you-go saw a lot of challenges because it relies on internet for the devices to be able to, phone home and ensure that like they're being used commensurate to what people have paid. But this starts to fall apart when you're in an environment where there's no internet connectivity. So a lot of the continent really outside of urban areas has got very poor connectivity. So developers and engineers who learn how to work around that either by using whatever mobile technology is available, voice, SMS, or USSD, I think that can be quite compelling. I've also seen some interesting activity around hardware and IoT with the first like locally assembled chips coming into play. I think that's happening mostly in South Africa and Kenya. I've not seen that happening outside of the continent, but we're now starting to see like our own homemade, home assembled equivalents of technologies like the Raspberry, which is a very popular sort of computer that is used in IoT applications. And I think that's where the future is going to be. Obviously, as some of these industries start to adopt the technologies, they're going to be environment. So developers who pay attention to this sector, I think, will be in a position to the opportunities that present themselves.
Okay. Thank you for that, Wiza. So blockchain, a very important technology, and we have Mr. Izo here. I've been doing a lot of research, and I'm not sure if governments are really ready right now to really embrace blockchain due to the lot of consequences that are involved. Is it really necessary, or what are the modalities one needs to take? So you've went ahead to actually launch an initiative called CronChain. I don't know how you've how you've made the similarities in the acronyms or whatever, but that sounds fascinating. But for someone like me, I've been hearing a lot of blockchain technologies, and you've seen Bitcoin, taking shape in a lot of the conversations you see on the internet. So from your experience, like, what is so fascinating about this technology that we need to know? Is it something that you will be encouraging people to hop into? What are the features that are involved? Is there any prospects for it to really be the future? We've seen Acorn, very ambitious, trying to build his own currency centered around blockchain technology. So, I mean, I'm pretty much interested from what you think. Is this really part of the emerging businesses that we can look out for the fourth industrial revolution?
Okay, thank you for those questions. I'd like to say today we are talking about Industry 4.0, and in the Industry 4.0, sorry, what is relevant is data. So now in Africa, every company is becoming, not only in Africa, every company is becoming a data company. But how can we be sure that those data are real data, are not fake data? That's where comes the blockchain with the transparency. So the blockchain have many properties, and one of the best property the blockchain have is transparency in any industry, like in finance, in GovTech, anywhere. You can use that blockchain property to make those information relevant, and also you can use the blockchain to incentivize also. So I will give an example. You can build, for a community. Like example, for a community, you can create a token, a private economy, like the Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a currency powered by the blockchain technology. It's just the technology that and in the blockchain in the Bitcoin case, you just have a computer calculation to make, and those calculations validate any transaction. So that's the property of the blockchain that I'm using with Cronchain, and I think currently Cronchain is being is in test with some institution in the real estate and also in the land, so to protect land title in Africa also, and many things also. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I was looking at through that some of the features that blockchain has is asset management, which was I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I think it has a component that it has asset digitalization, which I feel governments and other institutions that are really looking forward to managing real-time data in terms of documents could actually adopt if these features have been provided. I think what we are not seeing is how much of information is coming out from what blockchain technology could do for for the future of work. I think it would be great if you can share with some of these features that makes it really impeccable that we can use, as businesses are going forward.
Yes, yes. The big feature of the blockchain is the fact that anything you put in the blockchain cannot be modified. If you write one in the blockchain, you cannot come back and change it. Like no, it's time stamped there. Like if you write one at this moment, it will stay one at this moment. You can't come back like what we do in database. With a normal database, you can write one and come back and say no, it's two. But with the blockchain, you cannot do it. Anything you do in the blockchain is you cannot undo it. That's the power of the blockchain.
Thanks for that. I'll definitely come back to
it. I think it can be used even in election. In vote, it can be used to count vote, and also in finance. Currently, we are here in France, not only in France, in Europe, where they are moving on DeFi. That's for DeFi for decentralized finance. So that's what that's one of the future also of the blockchain.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I'm gonna go back to Mo, the IoT expert. Mo, so one of the things that I mean seems to be quite fascinating to know is what are manufacturers thinking at the moment, and what is the approach on the field and fix approach, like to predict and prevent maintenance, like how is it done in the IoT structure base?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can start by saying that like different countries have different levels of readiness on the infrastructure layer, and some of the colleagues mentioned that maybe the digital infrastructure in Africa, there is some improvement required there, right? It's the same situation in manufacturing. Different manufacturers have different levels of what we call digital maturity. Okay, so even if I am the same company and I have 20 manufacturing plants, each manufacturing plant may have a different level of digital maturity. So we always talk about people, process, technology, and we assess what is the maturity level around the people, the process, and the technology. And the fourth P is profit. If you're able to mature those three pillars, you're able to impact the profit using technology. So if you ask me the biggest challenge is usually on the infrastructure layer. It is preparing the connectivity. It is getting data from the machines, getting data from the factory. Different machines have different ages. Some machines are new, some machines are old. Some machines may require sensors. Some machines have an Ethernet port that you can connect to the network and immediately start pumping data out. So if you have a data lake right? If you have a data lake within your factory, within your operation, this data lake can be an input into an artificial intelligence based solution where you can use algorithms and you can convert that data into actionable metrics, right? And again, we talk about big data, right? I like to talk about smart data. I am not a believer in big data. I'm a believer in the right information for the right person at the right time, you know? Especially in manufacturing, people are busy, you're making parts, you have to make sure the parts are good. You have to make sure the people and the culture are there to support it, right? So the maintenance person needs something, the plant manager needs something, the machine operator needs something, right? So when I talk about smart data, we're talking about what are the relevant analytics and metrics that you would send to the right person at the right time so he or she can do a better job, which will then improve, again, the business case, improve your uptime, improve your quality, improve your efficiency on the factory floor. So I would not start by, you know, trying to implement a predictive analytics solution. I would start at the lowest level of maturity, which is let's get connected, let's create a data lake, let's have visibility, and then let's use the data now that we have to drive a predictive analytics approach.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's use the data. So Maodo, as an as an industrial analyst for Tony Blair Institute, your work is centered mainly on seeing what best practices or modalities can industries adapt. So I mean, we've had a conversation before in regards to the AFCFTA, which was a separate one, on some of these regulations that government could adapt. And I feel like when you talk about businesses, you also need component where governments understand some of the technologies that they could adapt, because it forms the building blocks in what exactly and how business can sit from this environment. So, what could you tell us about some of the work that you've been doing that is linked to ensuring that some of these policies government understand, and yeah.
Yeah, I think first, okay. Let me break it down into two parts. One is how do we prepare workforces for these new businesses or this new revolution, right? So that's number one. Number two is how do we enable it? So everything from finance to creating the business case and so on. So on the preparing workforces first. I think there's definite need, even at the moment, even, if there was no Industry 4.0, even if you're dealing with the third industrial revolution, I think, with our context, we're still struggling with that, So I think, honestly, you would need a huge program of what I like to call retraining, re-educating, and upskilling, you would really need to have these in place across the continent in a widespread manner and in an accessible manner in both public and private educational institutions. So you have widespread capability and ability to work in these industries, right? Because otherwise, you can build the business, you can build the infrastructure, but if the people aren't there to work in these these industries, then again, a crucial piece is missing, right? So that's number one. Number two is really ensuring, like I said, enabling these businesses to be able to thrive. So again, this is all from the government standpoint, so how do you create the right fiscal space? How do you find the funding? How do you strategize and plan around this? And I think if you look at Kenya, for example, right, they've done a great job of setting up, tech, not just for the use of the government or big business, but for the everyday person, really working on trying to bring costs of data, and when I say data, in this case, I mean internet data, the cost of internet data down, so small things like that will contribute to making the use of the internet more accessible, also making people more sort of used to dealing with technology, that all of this plays a role, luckily younger Africans are very much in tune with technology and they've grown up using technology. So that's a good sign. But then there's one thing being someone like me who can open his laptop and send an email, but it's another thing working, with Mo at his level of understanding of how sort of smart manufacturing works, and then it's a completely different thing, sort of, working with Izzo on blockchain and how to integrate that into our, even elections or finance system, for example. So again, just to recap, number one, employability within the sector, right? Working on how do you get your workforce to a position where they have the right skills, they have the right training, and they've been exposed enough to working with these technologies to be able to work in this revolution. Number two is financing. So governments really need to work to find innovative ways of supporting small businesses and medium-sized businesses to be able to transition into Industry 4.0. And like you said, the word repurpose, And then third is really working towards, enabling it, bringing down the cost of data, providing free land or building up the digital infrastructure in the country in order to allow these companies to thrive. So that's, the thinking that governments need to have, I believe, to really push this forward.
Great. So Kitawa, when you talk about emerging businesses, as Wiza alluded earlier, mobile money company is really very important. And that's where you have the likes of the M-Pesa. In Gambia, we have, two mobile money service providers that are trying to push, these technologies into the market, which is quite relevant because, it limits, printing cash is really expensive. We all know that. And I'm not sure if governments, are really ready to take up this responsibility to be printing a lot of cash. It's not sustainable. I feel so. You working with grassroots, which is one of the things that you do. I'm pretty much interested is, where is the future of getting these people trained lies, because it's really hard, when you talk about financial inclusion, which is definitely linked to tech, you can't do it without having a lot of advocacy. You working with grassroots level, how do you ensure to incorporate some of the technologies that could be great for the future of getting people to be sustainable, because then they don't have to spend or use a lot of cash. So what is the modalities that you're using based on your experience dealing with grassroots level to see the improvement of technology and the usage of technology as well, accessible to those people?
I love that question because it really echoes one of the biggest things that one of the most interesting tenets of wisdom that I came across this week, which was culture eats strategy any day, and there's a certain understanding that people at the grassroots have a strong love for their culture and how they work with each other and how they share resources. It's very interesting and very vibrant to see how that economy works and sustains itself to really build billion-dollar businesses that are not even included in the formal economy. Today I was actually taking a walk in Kibra, which is the second largest slum in Africa, and just seeing how vibrant and how fast money was moving. And this is money that is not included in the banks. It was just interesting to see that this network already exists, and building inclusive technology that then understands that there is a way of life that really works. And so if I think one of the interesting things about Kenya and M-Pesa and why it really worked really well in Kenya is it really understood the common man, the man at the grassroots. And that's one of the reasons why we've been able to build solutions, as Wiza said, around mobile technology. That's one of the biggest tech advancements in Africa, in Kenya. It's because it understood how money moves with the poorest Kenyan. And so just as that is, I think to be able to build technology and to make a difference is just understanding that those two things need to come together and build inclusive technology that understands how these people think and how they work, and it just work your way up the pyramid instead of starting your way at the top and trickling down. It's very different worlds and very different ideologies, and really cuts across Africa. And I love one of the things that I was discussing this week, which was in Africa, the child belongs to the community. Mm-hmm. And I think if we look at technology belonging to the community, then we will build mind-blowing tech and businesses that just solve the common problems.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Oh, wow, awesome. So, Wiza, I like the fact that you've mentioned, some of the finance and inclusion strategies, which I'm very much particular about, which I feel needs to be done more. So, Wiza, from your perspective as a developer, you've worked for Africa Token, which has generated up to $10 million, I guess, if my statistics sounds me right. But when you interlink some of the emerging businesses that are coming, one of the things that pops up that mostly are not addressed across Africa is the problems with regards to transactions, payments. And as a developer, how can we solve this problem? Because, these are questions that I get to be asked a lot, especially where I'm coming from. You're familiar with a lot of technologies and you want to scale your business, but getting these transactions to the other part of the world is really a challenge. And you can really get your businesses to scale and emerge if you are not really solving this issues. So, what are the issues in terms of African businesses and the challenges and the solutions that we can do to have these money transaction problems and for businesses to connect with the outside
world? Right. I think the biggest challenge is fragmentation of the payment methods and the content. So if you come to Kenya, there's M-Pesa. If you get on a plane for an hour and you find yourself in Kampala, there's no M-Pesa. There's MTN Mobile Money and there's Airtel Money. 2 hours away in Dar es Salaam, you'll not find MTN Mobile Money, but you find Vodacom M-Pesa, which is different from Safaricom M-Pesa, so on and so forth. So the biggest issue is fragmentation. In the Western Europe, all of the payments infrastructure for consumers essentially runs on cards. And these cards are issued by typically one of like 4 or 5 card network companies: Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, etc. And because of that, you've got this very cohesive, unified network for payments. There isn't a country that I've been to that I've not been able to use my my MasterCard or my Visa card in. But like when it comes to mobile money, that fragmentation remains a big challenge. We are seeing the industry start to move towards building solutions for that. For example, you have initiatives like Abuali, which is a group-wide initiative by MTN Group and Orange Group out of Paris to enable interoperability across mobile money networks across countries in Africa. And between the two of them, we've got a footprint that covers 30 plus countries on the continent. So we should start to see some improved support for international transactions as these mobile money systems converge. In terms of what individual developers can do, I don't think there's really much to be done. These are issues of national infrastructure, and you must rely on the providers of the infrastructure to make things happen. But there are interesting ways in which developers can, combine technologies to be able to cover a wider footprint by working with aggregation companies like InterSwitch, Flutterwave, Paystack, Bionic, for example, who can give you access to a wide variety of payment methods across a wide range of geographies. And more of these businesses are popping up. So it's just a matter of time until we have one API that covers them all, and you're able to transact internationally on the continent.
Okay, that's something that I will discuss with you later. That sounds amazing. So so Esso, just before we wrapped up this session, because it feels like we have a little bit of time, because I would really like your perceptions about the current situations for all of you guys, Corona, and I'm not sure this is going to end. So I'm not even seeing any signs right now, but tell us a bit more about the blockchain. The blockchain thing and what exactly you're building and how do we expect to see it in the market? What are we looking out for? Did you hear my question?
Yeah, your question. My mic was my mic.
Oh, okay, you were muted. Okay.
Yeah, so the blockchain can help improve the accuracy of information. So it can help remove siloed data, and also the fact that we need I don't know, we need human validation for some data. And also I will move back to my project. So I'm doing two things with Crunchchain. The first is the certification of asset. Like if you own an asset, you can transform your real world asset in the blockchain. It's something that is done. We call it NFT, so non-fungible tokens. We call it NFT, and I've started doing it with land. Currently, you can tokenize your land with my solution. And the second thing where you can do with the solution is also use this certification, this asset certification for a loan. You can use it like a collateral to have a quick loan. It's called a flash loan. We call it flash loan in the blockchain. So it's I will use a term again. There is a term we use is atomic swap. So it's all or nothing. Like if we agree for something, it will be done. Everything will be done at the same time, or nothing will be done. So that's what I'm doing. It's a little tricky. It's not really complicated, but I have to make a demo for someone to make that person really understand what is. But is a new concept of finance, and it's called decentralized finance. So that's what I'm doing.
All right, guys, and so now finally we've seen a situation with all the technologies that we've discussed, from IoT to blockchain to industrialization to developers and to female funds. Now we are in the situations where Mo, are we really going to be seeing a change of shift from the deployment of some of these technologies, or what's happening? Because there's nothing certain right now. We have seen some technologies used quite often. Well, the platform that we use in Zoom is an example, but what is the future like for all of these technologies? And this question cuts across for all of you guys. So just has to wrap up.
My very brief takeaway is a lot of economies and a lot of manufacturers, even in first world countries like the US, are still living in industry 2.0, and they're moving to industry 3.0. Okay, that's a true fact. Okay, and my view of the world is, and it was mentioned by some of the colleagues, education. Okay, we talked about so many great things today, blockchain, 5G, and startups and fintech and beautiful things, right? AI, machine learning, predictive analytics. But I bet you the audience who will be listening to this webinar in the future may only, unfortunately, know 5% of what we talked about. So my question is, how can we educate? And I give you an example from what we do at IoT Co. It's very important to start partnering with universities, right? Bring education, online certifications, find a way to have an industry 4.0 type of curriculum, embedded in your bachelor's, embedded in your master's, embedded in your PhD. And by the way, there's a lot of websites that have free industry 4.0 classes, like EDX and Audacity and all these guys, right? And they're available globally, all over the world. So the question is, how can the economies and the governments and the manufacturers educate their workforce? And like Maodo said, upskilling, right? How do you upskill your workforce? But you cannot start upskilling your workforce too late in the game, right? You have to start as early as possible. So I think the takeaway here is, regardless of the level of infrastructure, the level of economy, the level of government, the politics, et cetera, I think there is always a way for education to prevail and to find the best way to educate new talents. And then all these technologies could easily be converted into reality in the very near future.
Thank you so much. Maodo?
So for me, I'm all about turning this crisis into an opportunity. That's what I've been saying for the past 2 months. And I actually got it from the president of Ghana, who, so just a bit of context, I've been working on the response here in Ghana as well.
And from day one, his strategy was called turning the crisis into an opportunity. And so with that in mind, I think what we need to do is, look at the world in an optimistic way, but also be very pragmatic about how we move forward. So what do I mean by that? So on the one hand, we have stores in the US like Walmart and places like that using robots to stock shelves and clean stores because their workers are stuck at home, for example, right? And this shows you that in the capitalist world that we live in, and this is by no means a criticism of capitalism, but it's just a fact, you will be replaced if you no longer are of value. And like you said, Mo, the bottom line, the profit, is king, essentially. So we need to find a way of ensuring that within this revolution, we optimize the value of the workforce in a way that makes them indispensable to the new industries that are created, right? Otherwise, you'll have a situation where a lot of people will be moved out of their usual employment and they'll be stuck in this limbo. I mean, even if they're retrained some way down the line, there still will be a situation where there will be a lot of people who are all of a sudden out of work and don't have the skills to find work. And another example is, even truck drivers, in the US, that's a big industry and an industry that employs a lot of people. I watched a documentary recently on Vice where, even truck drivers are losing their jobs because now they don't need a driver. The innate sort of, artificial intelligence within the trucks are even smarter and better at driving the trucks than the people. So we're dealing with something that if we don't handle it properly, can really create some ripples, that will cause issues for a long time. But I think, being optimistic about this and being pragmatic will get us through it. And I hope businesses and governments can have that approach.
Kitawa?
Yeah, I mean, I like both the sentiments on education and also seeing opportunity in all this. But one of the things that I'd really love to push for is we just need to stop coping with change and just adapt and grow. I feel that one of the biggest things that do hold us back is that we are very reactive in how we grow in building our businesses and growing the continent and building the unicorns that are shattering ceilings. But the thing is, if we begin to adapt, then we will be ahead of the curve and not only build solutions when there's a demand for it, as Mo has said, in terms like we need to see the opportunity, but we also need to see the opportunity 10 years from now and build the solution now for a 10-year problem that we are anticipating as a continent. And I think the beauty of being the last business frontier as Africa is I think we have the greatest opportunity for Industry 4.0, that we have the advantage of seeing what has happened in other countries and just see how best we can come up with our own disruptive economies and innovation. So let's just begin adapting to change. Yeah.
Great. Wiza?
Yeah, mostly echoing a lot of the sentiments already shared. I agree with a lot of what has been said. I do disagree with one point that was raised by Mo. He called the United States a first world country. I think that's debatable. But apart from that, I think what we need to do in African countries specifically might be around like policy and regulation. I think a lot of the policy and regulation is still a bit retrogressive for the world we're going into. And because it is this section of government that doesn't get as much attention as many other areas, it's often neglected. But then a lot of the barriers to adoption of these technologies or growth of the infrastructure that would support education or support productivity is highly dependent on really progressive infrastructure. Do you know that as a foreigner, you cannot go to Ethiopia and start a business today? Ethiopia is the second most populous nation on the continent. You need to have a minimum of $100,000 before you can incorporate a company there, which doesn't make any sense. in today's world. So I would say that regulation is something that we need to pay attention to, and we the people need to lobby to ensure that some changes really happen quickly in that sector, and then we can continue to grow quickly.
Esso?
I think Wiza said what I was thinking also. Yeah. So the barrier, I think the barrier in Africa is sometimes, I don't say it many times, but it's sometimes the institution and also the education. I think that's you guys have already shared what I think, so it's okay for me.
Thank you, guys. So I'm still receiving, receiving RSVPs on the emails. I think there's a problem with the timing, so it's quite unfortunate for some of the folks that still want to join in. I think that was an error from somewhere, but that's fine. But thank you all for being part of this. I mean, I've learned a lot. I'm a tech enthusiast, so very particular about the development of Africa, and how we can move businesses forward. So it has been a pleasure to have all of you, taking your time to share the insights with us and to the rest of the world. And it's a pleasure. I'm really inspired to have all of you guys. You guys are, I would say, the revolution for the change that we need for the world. So obviously, it was a pleasure. I was definitely excited to have all of you guys, and I'm sure you guys have also learned a lot from each other as speakers, with the different views and whatnot. So on this note, I would like to wrap it up, and also special thanks to our sponsors, Table. We've been working together, so they power this event, and also Startup Guide, of course, with the support. I've been disturbing them with a lot of messages to make sure that they fix stuff. So yeah, thank you guys, HQ team, and yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Stay healthy.
Thank you, guys.